Imagine spending 9 years alone in freezing Himalayan caves, surviving on nothing but nettle soup until your skin turns green. Your body becomes skeletal, and everyone who sees you thinks you're a ghost or a demon. Most people would call this insanity. But one man's extreme retreat in these conditions fundamentally transformed Tibetan Buddhism, proving that complete enlightenment in a single lifetime is possible even after committing terrible crimes, and establishing a lineage of practice that continues to inspire millions today. Jetsun Milarepa, Tibet's most beloved yogi and poet, spent 9 years in caves developing practices and realizations that would change Buddhist history forever. If you're ready to discover how one man's radical commitment to practice created an entirely new approach to enlightenment, demonstrating that the worst sinner can become the greatest saint through dedicated effort, then subscribe to this channel immediately and activate notifications, because Milarepa's story will challenge everything you believe about what's possible through spiritual practice. Who was Milarepa before he entered those caves? He was a murderer, a black magician who killed 35 people, including his own uncle and aunt, through sorcery, destroying an entire wedding party with a hailstorm and collapsing a house with his dark powers. Born in 1040 in western Tibet to a wealthy family, Milarepa's comfortable childhood ended abruptly when his father died. His uncle and aunt seized the family property, reducing Milarepa, his mother, and sister to servants in their own home. They suffered years of abuse, humiliation, and grinding poverty. When Milarepa came of age, his mother's rage and bitterness had festered into an obsession with revenge. She sold everything remaining to send her son to learn black magic, making him promise to use these powers to destroy their enemies. Milarepa found a sorcerer who taught him powerful spells, and he returned to his village to exact terrible vengeance. The wedding celebration he destroyed killed the uncle and many relatives. The crops he ruined with hailstorms devastated the region. He was efficient, thorough, and completely successful in his revenge, but success tasted like poison. After the initial satisfaction faded, Milarepa was overwhelmed with remorse. He had become exactly what he despised, someone who inflicts suffering on others. The weight of 35 deaths crushed his conscience. He knew with absolute certainty that he had created massive negative karma that would result in countless lifetimes of horrific suffering unless he found a way to purify it completely. This recognition drove him to seek genuine Buddhist teachings, not for worldly success or power, but for liberation from the consequences of his terrible actions. He understood that ordinary good deeds would never balance the scale of his crimes. He needed something radical, something that could purify even the worst karma. He needed a teacher who wouldn't reject him despite what he'd done. His search led him to Marpa the Translator, one of the founding fathers of the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. Marpa had traveled to India multiple times, studying with the great master Naropa and bringing back teachings on Mahamudra and the 6 Yogas of Naropa. These were advanced tantric practices promising enlightenment in a single lifetime. But when Milarepa arrived expecting teachings, Marpa subjected him to years of brutal ordeals. "Build a tower," Marpa commanded. Milarepa built it. "Tear it down, it's in the wrong place," Marpa said. "Build another." Milarepa complied. Again and again, Marpa ordered towers built and demolished, refusing to give any teachings, treating Milarepa harshly while showing kindness to other students. Milarepa's back broke from carrying stones. His body developed huge sores from the labor. He came to the edge of suicide, believing his karma was too heavy even for Marpa to address. What Milarepa didn't know was that this was the teaching. Marpa was systematically destroying Milarepa's pride, his expectations, his sense of deserving anything, his attachment to results, and most importantly, purifying his negative karma through intense hardship willingly endured. In the Vajrayana Buddhist system, purification happens through one of 4 powers: the power of regret for past actions, the power of commitment to restraint from future harmful actions, the power of taking refuge in enlightened beings, and the power of applying antidotes through practice. Marpa was applying all 4 simultaneously through the tower-building ordeals. When Marpa finally accepted Milarepa as a formal student and gave him the complete transmission of teachings, Milarepa was a completely different person, humble, devoted, and utterly determined to achieve enlightenment in this very lifetime, no matter what it took. Share in the comments. What would you be willing to sacrifice for complete spiritual realization? After receiving Marpa's teachings, Milarepa understood what he needed to do. He had to practice with absolute intensity and complete isolation until he achieved full realization. No half measures, no gradual path over many lifetimes, no comfortable monastery practice. He needed to go into solitary retreat in the harshest conditions and practice until enlightenment manifested, or he died trying. This wasn't morbid determination. It was crystal clear understanding of what his karma demanded and what genuine practice requires. So Milarepa began his legendary cave retreats, spending 9 years in primary retreat and additional years in various caves across the Himalayas, living under conditions that would kill most people within weeks. The caves Milarepa chose were deliberately extreme. They were high-altitude locations where winter temperatures plunged far below freezing, where snow blocked entrances for months, where no food grew, where predators prowled, and where human company was non-existent for vast stretches of time. One of his primary retreat sites was Drakar Tasso, White Rock Horsetooth Cave, a limestone cave at over 13,000 feet elevation. Another was Chuar, a cave so remote and forbidding that even shepherds avoided it. He spent long periods in Lapchi, a sacred cave complex considered a dwelling place of Chakrasamvara, an important meditation deity. Each location offered perfect conditions for practice: complete isolation, severe hardship that tested determination daily, and natural solitude that stripped away all worldly distractions. Milarepa's practice routine was ruthlessly simple. He would wake before dawn, perform preliminary practices including prostrations and offerings, then settle into meditation posture for the entire day and night. His primary practice was Tummo, the yoga of inner heat, one of the 6 yogas of Naropa. Tummo involves sophisticated visualization and breath control techniques that generate intense inner heat, allowing practitioners to maintain body temperature even in freezing conditions. The practice works with the subtle body system of channels, winds, and drops that Tibetan Vajrayana maps in extraordinary detail. Through precise visualization of the central channel and side channels, controlled breathing that forces prana or vital energy into the central channel, and the ignition of inner fire at the navel chakra, advanced Tummo practitioners can raise body temperature dramatically. Milarepa became so accomplished at Tummo that he sat naked in winter caves, his body radiating heat that melted snow around him, wearing only a simple white cotton cloth. But Tummo wasn't just about generating heat. The same techniques that produce physical warmth produce profound mental transformation. When prana enters the central channel through these practices, ordinary conceptual thinking temporarily ceases. The usual discursive mental activity that jumps from thought to thought, spinning narratives and reinforcing ego, stops. In that gap, the practitioner can recognize Rigpa, the fundamental nature of awareness itself. This recognition is the essence of Mahamudra, the Great Seal, the other primary practice Marpa transmitted to Milarepa. Mahamudra points directly to the nature of mind, teaching practitioners to rest in awareness itself rather than in the contents of awareness. Instead of following thoughts, emotions, and sensations, you recognize the awareness that knows them. Instead of identifying with the changing stream of experience, you rest as the unchanging space in which experience appears. Milarepa practiced with an intensity few have matched. He would maintain meditation posture for days without moving, entering states of absorption so deep that his breathing became imperceptible. He developed the ability to remain in meditation continuously, maintaining recognition of mind's nature through all activities. When he needed to fetch water or gather nettles, he remained in the meditation state. When he slept, he maintained awareness through the sleep and dream states, practicing dream yoga. He had no schedule, no routine beyond continuous practice. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. His only food was nettle soup made from wild nettles growing near the caves. This diet provided minimal nutrition, and Milarepa's body became emaciated, his skin taking on a greenish tint from the nettles, his hair growing long and matted. He owned nothing except his cotton cloth and a clay pot for cooking nettles. If you're inspired by Milarepa's dedication to practice, please like this video and share it with fellow practitioners. Why such extreme asceticism? Milarepa wasn't punishing himself or adhering to some doctrine that suffering itself is virtuous. The extreme conditions served specific purposes in his practice. First, living with absolute minimal material possessions eliminated distraction. When you own nothing, you have nothing to maintain, organize, protect, or worry about. Your attention is completely free for practice. Second, the physical hardship of cold, hunger, and isolation tests and strengthens determination. Every day Milarepa chose to stay in the cave rather than descend to comfort was a victory over ordinary self-cherishing. Third, the harsh conditions naturally generated renunciation, the deep recognition that worldly pleasures are ultimately unsatisfying and that liberation is the only worthy goal. When you're cold, hungry, and alone, you're not distracted by entertainment, social validation, or sensory pleasures. You face reality directly. This body will die, this life will end, and if you haven't achieved liberation, the cycle continues. Fourth, and most subtly, the extreme conditions worked specifically with the subtle body practices of Tummo and Mahamudra. The cold environment provided perfect feedback for Tummo practice. You either generated inner heat, or you froze. There was no pretending, no intellectual understanding masquerading as realization. Your body temperature was objective proof of whether the practice was working. Similarly, the solitude and simplicity supported Mahamudra by removing all the ordinary reference points that reinforce ego structure. In normal social life, your sense of self is constantly reinforced through interactions, roles, projects, and possessions. In the cave, none of these existed. You couldn't be important because no one knew you existed. You couldn't be successful because there was nothing to achieve. You couldn't maintain social persona because there was no society. The usual scaffolding of ego had nothing to attach to, making it much easier to recognize ego as a construction rather than a solid reality. During these 9 primary retreat years and additional retreat periods, Milarepa experienced the full spectrum of practice challenges and breakthroughs. He faced intense physical suffering from cold and hunger. He experienced attacks by demons, which traditional Tibetan Buddhism understands as externalizations of internal obstacles and which Milarepa transformed through recognizing them as displays of mind. He underwent periods of doubt, wondering if he had gone insane, if the practice was working, if enlightenment was actually possible. He experienced visions and dreams that tested his discrimination between genuine insight and delusion. He struggled with loneliness and the human need for companionship, and gradually through it all, he experienced progressively deeper realizations. The signs of accomplishment began to appear. His physical body, despite inadequate nutrition, became extraordinarily strong and flexible. He developed the ability to control bodily processes that are normally involuntary, stopping his breath for extended periods, controlling his heartbeat, generating intense heat at will. He manifested paranormal abilities called siddhis, the ability to fly, to pass through solid rock, to be in multiple places simultaneously, to read minds, to know past lives. Buddhist tradition is ambivalent about these powers, considering them byproducts of practice rather than goals, and warning that attachment to them creates obstacles to final liberation. Milarepa demonstrated these abilities occasionally to inspire faith in students, but he never emphasized them as important. What mattered was the transformation of his mind. The deepest transformations were internal. Milarepa achieved stable realization of Mahamudra, resting continuously in recognition of mind's nature regardless of circumstances. He realized emptiness directly, seeing that all phenomena lack inherent existence and arise through dependent origination. He developed complete compassion for all beings, understanding that their suffering arises from ignorance that could be dispelled. He achieved what Vajrayana Buddhism calls the realization of deity, recognizing that his ordinary body and mind and the pure form and mind of enlightened beings are not ultimately different. Most importantly, he completely purified the negative karma from his early crimes, transforming the worst possible starting point into full enlightenment. How did Milarepa's cave years change Tibetan Buddhism? In several fundamental ways. First, he proved definitively that complete enlightenment in a single lifetime is genuinely possible, not just theoretical. Before Milarepa, this claim was part of Vajrayana teaching. but there were few recent examples of someone achieving it completely. Milarepa became the exemplar, the living proof that even the worst karma can be purified and complete realization achieved through intensive practice of the right methods. This gave tremendous inspiration and hope to practitioners throughout Tibet, and continues to inspire practitioners worldwide today. If Milarepa could achieve enlightenment after murdering 35 people, anyone can achieve it. There's no karma too heavy, no obstacle too great, if you practice with sufficient dedication. Second, Milarepa established a model of practice that emphasized intensive retreat over monastery scholarship. The Kagyu lineage that traces through Milarepa became known as the practice lineage, emphasizing meditation and retreat over philosophical study and debate. While other lineages like the Gelug emphasized years of systematic study of philosophy before advanced meditation practice, the Kagyu approach, following Milarepa's example, emphasized practice from the beginning. This created a healthy diversity within Tibetan Buddhism, offering different paths suitable for different temperaments. Some people are naturally drawn to scholarship and intellectual understanding. Others, like Milarepa, are drawn to direct experience through intensive meditation. Both approaches are valid, and Milarepa's success validated the intensive practice approach. Third, Milarepa made Mahamudra and the Six Yogas of Naropa central to Kagyu practice. While these teachings existed before him, Milarepa demonstrated their effectiveness so dramatically that they became defining practices of the lineage. The Kagyu transmission emphasizes direct introduction to mind's nature, pointing out instructions that allow students to recognize Mahamudra under the guidance of a realized teacher, then supporting extended retreat practice to stabilize that recognition. This approach differs from more gradual paths that involve years of preliminary practices before receiving direct instructions. Milarepa showed that with the right introduction and sufficient intensity of practice, realization can happen quickly. Fourth, Milarepa became the model for the Tibetan Buddhist institution of the lifetime retreatant. Following his example, the Kagyu lineage and other traditions established 3-year retreats, where practitioners enter intensive group or solitary retreat for 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days, practicing the same advanced techniques Milarepa mastered. These retreats continue today in Tibetan Buddhist centers worldwide, maintaining the intensive practice tradition that Milarepa exemplified. Thousands of practitioners have completed these retreats, and many describe them as the most transformative experience of their lives. This institutional structure ensures that Milarepa's approach to practice continues generation after generation. Please share this video with anyone who needs inspiration for intensive spiritual practice. Fifth, Milarepa created a vast body of spiritual poetry that became treasured teaching texts. The 100,000 Songs of Milarepa records his spontaneous songs of realization, called dohas, composed throughout his life but especially during and after his cave years. These songs express profound philosophical truths in accessible, emotionally moving poetry. They describe his experiences in practice, his realizations, his teachings to students, and his responses to various situations. The songs became beloved throughout Tibet, memorized and sung by practitioners. They made advanced teachings accessible to ordinary people who might not grasp philosophical treatises, but could understand and be moved by poetry. Milarepa demonstrated that spiritual realization naturally expresses itself in artistic creativity, and his songs continue to inspire practitioners centuries later. Sixth, Milarepa's story became the archetypal narrative of redemption and transformation in Tibetan culture. The Life of Milarepa, the biographical text written by Tsangnon Haruka in the 15th century, is one of the most widely read texts in Tibetan Buddhism. It's inspired countless practitioners to take up serious practice, given hope to people struggling with guilt over past actions, and demonstrated the power of guru devotion, intensive practice, and unwavering determination. The story works on multiple levels, as literal biography, as symbolic teaching about purification and enlightenment, and as inspiration for practice. It shows that spiritual transformation requires both genuine remorse for past harmful actions and the determination to do whatever it takes to purify and transcend those patterns. Seventh, Milarepa established a lineage of realized yogis living in caves and remote hermitages rather than in monasteries. The Kagyu tradition maintains this hermit yogin tradition alongside its monastic institutions. Even today, practitioners undertake extended solitary retreats in caves and hermitages throughout the Himalayan region, following Milarepa's example. This maintains a countercultural element within Tibetan Buddhism that resists institutionalization and emphasizes direct experience over formal learning. Milarepa proved that enlightenment doesn't require monastic infrastructure, academic degrees, or institutional support. It requires teachings, determination, and a cave. What can contemporary practitioners learn from Milarepa's 9 years in caves? Several crucial lessons emerge. First, genuine transformation requires genuine commitment. Milarepa didn't practice casually or when convenient. He gave everything to practice, sacrificing comfort, social connection, health, and nearly his life. While few modern practitioners can or should replicate his extreme approach, the principle remains. Transformation requires dedication beyond what's comfortable. You cannot achieve extraordinary results through ordinary effort. If you want results beyond what most people achieve, you must practice beyond what most people are willing to practice. Second, the right method makes the difference between wasted effort and rapid progress. Milarepa had received direct transmission from Marpa, who received it from Naropa, who received it from Tilopa, an unbroken lineage of realized masters. He practiced proven methods under qualified guidance. He wasn't inventing his own approach or mixing techniques randomly. This is why Tibetan Buddhism emphasizes authentic lineage and qualified teachers. The methods work, but only if practiced correctly, as transmitted through masters who've achieved realization themselves. Contemporary practitioners need to find authentic teachers and lineages rather than creating personal spiritual systems that lack the power and precision of transmitted methods. Third, purification of negative karma is possible no matter how severe the actions. Milarepa's story offers tremendous hope to anyone carrying guilt or shame about past actions. You're not permanently defined by what you've done. Through genuine regret, confession, commitment to restraint, and intensive practice of purification methods, you can transform your karma. This doesn't mean past actions didn't have consequences. It means those consequences can be exhausted and transcended rather than condemning you to endless suffering. The Buddhist understanding of karma includes the possibility of purification, and Milarepa proved this possibility extends even to extreme negative karma. Fourth, enlightenment is the most worthwhile goal possible, justifying any sacrifice required to achieve it. Milarepa's willingness to endure 9 years of extreme hardship wasn't masochism. It was clear-sighted recognition that liberation from the cycle of suffering is worth any temporary discomfort. Most people organize their lives around avoiding discomfort and pursuing pleasure, but Milarepa recognized that these strategies perpetuate the very suffering they're meant to escape. Only liberation offers genuine freedom from suffering. Once you truly understand this, intensive practice becomes the only rational choice. Everything else is rearranging furniture on a sinking ship. Fifth, practice must address both conventional and ultimate levels. Milarepa worked extensively with the subtle body practices of Tummo and the 6 yogas, and he simultaneously practiced Mahamudra recognition of mind's nature. The subtle body practices work at the energetic level, transforming the neurological and psychological patterns encoded in habitual prana flows. The Mahamudra practice works at the ultimate level, recognizing the emptiness and luminosity of awareness itself. Both are necessary. Working only with ultimate truth without transforming the subtle energy patterns leaves those patterns as obstacles that pull you back into ordinary consciousness. Working only with energy practices without the wisdom of recognizing emptiness can produce powerful experiences and abilities, but not complete liberation. Milarepa integrated both perfectly. Milarepa's influence extended beyond the Kagyu lineage. All Tibetan Buddhist traditions respect him as a supreme example of practice and realization. His story is taught to children. His songs are recited at ceremonies. His cave sites are pilgrimage destinations. His example challenges comfortable Buddhism, the version that fits conveniently into ordinary life without demanding fundamental transformation. He stands as a permanent reminder that the Buddha's enlightenment wasn't metaphorical, that complete liberation is possible, and that it requires commitment most people aren't willing to make. This is uncomfortable but necessary. Without figures like Milarepa, Buddhism risks becoming merely therapeutic, helping people cope with samsara rather than liberating them from it entirely. Contemporary neuroscience offers some validation for Milarepa's practices. Studies of advanced meditators show that intensive practice produces measurable changes in brain structure and function. Long-term meditators show increased cortical thickness in areas associated with attention and sensory processing. They show enhanced gamma wave synchronization during meditation, the same frequency associated with moments of insight and unified conscious experience. They demonstrate voluntary control over normally involuntary processes, including pain perception, emotional reactivity, and even some autonomic functions. While science can't validate claims about enlightenment or liberation, it does validate that intensive meditation practice produces profound neurological changes that would certainly have occurred in Milarepa's brain during his 9 years of continuous practice. The question contemporary practitioners must ask is not whether to replicate Milarepa's extreme approach, but what principles from his practice apply to modern life. How can you practice with Milarepa's intensity within your circumstances? What degree of renunciation is necessary for your practice to be effective? What sacrifices are you willing to make for genuine realization? Where is the line between wisdom that recognizes worldly achievement as ultimately unsatisfying and nihilism that rejects responsibility? These are not easy questions, and they don't have universal answers. But Milarepa's example forces you to ask them seriously, rather than assuming that minimal practice while maintaining comfortable ordinary life will somehow produce extraordinary results. Milarepa died in 1123 at age 84, surrounded by students. His death demonstrated final attainments including conscious dying and the achievement of the rainbow body, where the physical body dissolves into light at death. His legacy continues through the Kagyu lineage he founded, through the countless practitioners inspired by his story, and through his songs that continue to teach, inspire, and point toward the nature of mind. His 9 years in caves didn't just transform him. They transformed Tibetan Buddhism by proving that the highest teachings work, that complete purification is possible, that enlightenment in one lifetime is achievable, and that the human spirit is capable of dedication and transformation beyond what ordinary life ever demands. What aspect of Milarepa's practice challenges or inspires you most? Can you imagine undertaking intensive retreat, and what stops you? Share your reflections in the comments, and let's explore together what intensive practice might look like in contemporary life. If Milarepa's story has moved you or challenged your assumptions about what's possible through practice, subscribe to this channel for more teachings from the great masters of Tibetan Buddhism. Share this video with practitioners who need inspiration to deepen their commitment, and consider what you're willing to do, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to endure, for the possibility of complete liberation in this very lifetime. Milarepa proved it's possible. The question is whether you'll follow his example, adapted to your circumstances but maintaining his intensity of commitment. May his story inspire you to practice with the dedication that leads to genuine transformation, and may all beings achieve the realization that Milarepa demonstrated through 9 years in freezing caves, practicing until enlightenment manifested completely.